Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
This is our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it and bang that thumbs up button. Give us a like.
Podcast in the description. Go subscribe to that as well. Do it. Tell your friends.
Any question that Robert Saleh coached his last game for the 49ers in your mind?
The more you think about it, by the time that you listen to this or watch this video, maybe we'll have more openings than we expect. But as of right now, 5 teams, I guess it could change, like get to 6 or 7. But if a couple of these college guys, if Matt Campbell becomes the Jets coach and Urban Meyer becomes the Jags coach, let's just say, all of a sudden you're just looking at 3 spots, and who knows? Maybe Marvin Lewis gets a job. Then you're basically Robert Saleh, Arthur Smith, Brian Daboll, Eric Bieniemy. All these guys are fighting for kind of like 2 spots.
Yeah, does Raheem just keep the job in Atlanta?
I guess the Chargers, haven't officially become open. The one thing working against Robert Saleh, when I just throw out the coordinators, like the first 4 that come to mind, him included, it's Saleh, Smith, Daboll, Bieniemy. Those guys do have something that just Saleh can't provide, and that's they work with quarterbacks, right? They call the offense. There is, the more I get back to this, in a league that's just so predicated on offense, I just wonder if the team's like part of hiring Urban Meyer, he is an offensive guy, right? I don't even know what
I think you're really hiring him for organization, though, right?
True, but like his offense is, I mean, he
to
leans
me, Matt
offense.
Campbell's an organizational guy. Urban, you're right, leans offense. That's true. But he is an organizational guy. Like, I think one thing that Saleh has going for him.
Saleh's getting this Lions combination like it's a college job, which is a little weird.
Yeah, and I don't like that. And I wouldn't, to me, it's always weird in college. And if I were him, I would take, there are other jobs I would take over the Lions job, right?
I think it's less weird in college, because I do think it matters in certain areas.
In college, yeah.
It matters in the South. I think it gets
in the West. Overvalued in college, but you're right. It doesn't matter way more than it does in the NFL.
It did not matter at all that Del Rio was from the Bay Area when he got the Raider job at all.
No,
right?
It's just stupid stuff that looks good in a press release. Like in the press conference, right? Like, I grew up coming to games. And like, okay, that's cool. It's not nothing, but it doesn't matter.
I'm 57 now, so that was 40 years ago.
It cracks me up. But I do think one of the things, if I'm an owner watching and you go, okay, yeah, all those guys, that's a great case you can make. But I'm watching the Bills right now going, how are they figuring it out with Sean McDermott, right? I'm watching Baltimore going, I don't know what their guy does. I'm watching Pittsburgh. He's an organizational guy. Seattle, he's a defensive coach, but he's not an offensive coach, right? So I'm watching Ron Rivera just change this franchise that is just a mess.
And you're saying Saleh has a lot working for him.
Yeah, I'm saying maybe there's more working for him than it seems, because here's the thing. This season didn't end, and then Saleh, who has just been a name for 2 years, is just still a name like he's been for 2 years. The season ended, I think, for him with quite a bit of momentum. Like, he came into the year with some momentum. He went into last offseason with momentum, came into the year with momentum. And then the way it played out for like a month or two was like, well, this might not work out in his favor. They're getting too many guys hurt. This will be bad. And then by the end, they had everybody hurt, and they were still good on defense. And then they played in a few big games, and he was on TV yelling and screaming, and it turned out like, I think he was really good again. I think his stock has gone up since they played in the Super Bowl.
I agree. And I think his number one attribute is going to be people love him. Like, that, to me, the number one thing is because you're not hiring a defensive guy because of scheme. If the guy's in the mix to interview, his defense is good, right? So it's like, that's just, we get that. But to me, his number one attribute is like people follow when he says, and he resonates with guys. Like, I saw Jeff Ulbrich. I think it was like Friday.
Yeah.
They had to work from home and kind of just gave it. I don't know if it was impromptu. I mean,
it was his last press. It was like the last time he was going to talk to the media.
Yeah. And he's like, I just want to say something about Raheem Morris. And just reading that, I do think he brought up a pretty good point for a guy that I remember growing up on in the late 90s, was on some of those Niners teams. And is like a Jim Mora, kind of an old school guy, kind of admitting like the game's changed a lot and the players are a lot different, clearly, than like the 80s, but even like when I was playing in the late 90s, early 2000s, this guy, and I do think he was genuine. Like, I don't think he's just hoping the guy, I was like, this guy resonates with guys. So if like This guy's a
I thought
legitimate coach.
it was a great quote.
It was really impressive. And I think it's why you see, like, the Niners are going to want Raheem Morris. The Raiders are going to want Raheem Morris. Like, Raheem Morris is clearly a really high-level guy.
You're talking about if he's not the head coach as a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, as a defensive coordinator. I do think Saleh, if you just hear people talk about him, it read a lot like that. Like, he just resonates, whether it's Richard Sherman or whether it's with, like, Javon Kinlaw, right, who was homeless 3 or 4 years ago. It was like he can just, which is a big thing, I think, in 2020 because it's a double whammy. One, these owners have never been paying players more. Now, I get it's all relative. Like, they've always had the money to pay them. So whether you're paying them $1 million and you're making 10, or whether you're making 100 and you're paying them 20, right? It's all. But still, like, the bigger the checks get, I just think the more pressure comes. You go, can the guy relate with my players? Can he get the most out of my players? Especially when you look around the league and you go, God, I mean, Pete's crushing it. People love Andy, McVay, Kyle. Like, these type guys really resonate. It's like that's kind of what you want. Even Joe Judge. Just seeing some of the way players talk about him, like, and I think Belichick and Saban, sometimes you think those old assholes, clearly the players like them. You know, like, whenever you see the, like, Alabama guys, because the season's going to be over. Now, who knows with Corona, like, how many guys, if it was a normal year, think how many NFL non-playoff Alabama guys would be at that game. And it's just, they're welcome, and it's just kind of normal, and Saban will kind of fucking give Amari as he's walking.
On the sideline, yeah.
It just feels kind of natural to these guys, and I do think that's important in 2020. It's always been important, but it's just a little different now. I think basically what Ulbrich was saying, like,
the players make a lot more money than us now.
Yeah, you can't just motherfuck these guys all day. It's not going to work. Because Jim Mora, that is kind of his style, right? And that's an Ulbrich guy.
You know, the other thing about Saleh, like, what you just made me think of this when you're talking about Raheem Morris. We've sat in many of Robert Saleh's press conferences just over the years, right? You and I have been to several practices on a day where it just turns out Robert Saleh's talking that day, and so you go sit in the media room with the other members of the media. It's like 15 people in there, and Robert Saleh talks. And for a guy who is really high energy on the sidelines, you can see what he feels. The camera loves Robert Saleh on the sideline because he's very active. Yeah. He's not a roller coaster emotional guy. Like, there are some guys that act like that, and then they get in front of the podium and the microphone, and they're talking trash, and they're saying whatever they want, and they're not really in line with the head coach, and and it turns out that some of what they're doing on the sidelines is about getting themselves attention. With Saleh, it's clearly not that. He's not doing any of that stuff on the sidelines to get himself attention, and I'm confident in that because when I've watched him talk, he doesn't say anything that makes it about himself. He doesn't give you any. He doesn't try to be hilarious. He has a good rapport with people, but he's just there to do what he's supposed to do. He doesn't act like he dislikes it. He clearly.
It's probably why he interviews so well, right?
He is for a guy who acts very high energy on the sideline. He's actually a really even keel guy, whereas sometimes those guys can be kind of roller coasters, right? He's not.
He's kind of more like like Kyle that way. Like, once they talk, they both are just like there's not
feels
much
like Kyle's lows might be even lower, might be lower.
Yeah.
But Kyle's the head coach. It's different, right?
Yeah.
Roberts.
I don't think Saleh's lows as a head coach. I think that's where he's probably a little Gus Bradley-ish, just that positive energy.
Yeah.
Like I think Kyle. Because when I think Kyle, I think Mike. I mean, there's just
Kyle,
there's some natural negativity.
Kyle has to fight more anger demons
which I do think is healthy in football. I mean, it's not just roses all day long. And I think sometimes that's where Gus Bradley, and that's where that would be my one question with Robert. Like, is he too positive of a guy? I'd say Pete's been a pretty big outlier.
I think I think it's unique for a defensive coach to have that person to be a air quotes positive guy. It's a unique combination. It works with the offense.
It's all Pete's guys. Dan Quinn, Gus Bradley. I think Ken Norton is a lot like that. Robert Saleh. Like, Pete doesn't surround himself with negativity.
No,
Give him that, right? He doesn't. Like, his guys are uplifters. And I do think it comes natural. Like, I don't think Gus Bradley, Dan Quinn. I mean, you hear all these people tell these stories about these guys. They, like, really are what Pete kind of sounds like. Pete has been the only guy that can win like that, like, consistently, right? It's hard. Like, Dan Quinn kept saying over and over, and Dan Quinn was probably the best version of the Pete tree. Because is Robert Saleh the Kyle tree or the Pete tree, or kind of both? Pete did put him on get him going.
Yeah, I mean,
Gus.
It's a good question. I mean, Kyle doesn't have a tree yet. He would be the first.
Kubiak, he's probably a combination of it.
We'd have to see what, it's the fact that he's a defensive coach, and Pete's defensive coaches are the ones that get jobs.
Yeah.
Probably makes him feel like part of that tree.
He does feel, well,
I mean, Gus,
yeah. Tanner, Pete.
Dan Quinn did go to the Super Bowl.
But I'm saying Dan Quinn was solid. Like, Dan Quinn is a lot better than Gus Bradley. But I do think the problem with Dan Quinn, when you just read about what happened in Atlanta, was just like his message when you're always saying positive. Like, Andy is not a negative guy. But there is an accountability that, like, you ain't hitting it. You all of a sudden you'll be like, God damn, Billy got cut. It's like one of those things on Monday. Like,
also, Andy impacts the game so much as a play caller.
True, but I would say the one way he consistently sets his tone is like, I'm not going to waste much time yelling at you. We will just replace guys in the season, bench guys, cut guys. I think Kyle's a lot like that. Right?
Yeah, but
not much like. And I wonder if Robert Saleh, sometimes that guy always feels he can save a guy.
I think the thing he has going for him, though, is he's clearly more than just he is I would imagine he would call defense when he gets his job.
I'd hope so, yeah.
Yeah, like he's not he is we're talking about him like he's a culture big picture guy. But I think what this season really established was he is a very good defensive coordinator, right? Yes. So if his defenses are really good, then there's just a kind of a tone that sets for your team.
Yeah. Got to happen. I mean, we see it a lot where, like, the coordinator goes to a job and it's the opposite. You're like, God, isn't this guy an offensive guy? Why is defense? Sometimes it's hard because you're going to go to a shitty team.
Yeah.
Usually when you go to a shitty team, their defense is way worse than their offense, right? Especially some of these openings, like the Texans, the Falcons, the Lions. Marvin Jones, I look up, Marvin Jones is like 50 fantasy points today. Matt Stafford threw 4 touchdowns. Like, when you think the Lions, the defense is not their issue. When I think the Falcons, the offense is not their issue. Their defenses are terrible. And I think the thing we've seen with the Niners, like, it took them a couple years to get some of the Jimmies and the Joes. And then even their backups became solid. Robert Saleh's defense, wherever he goes, more than likely is just going to suck right off the bat.
Yeah.
And it would suck, like, if him and Kyle showed up.
If he goes to the Chargers, I bet it'd be good pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, they're already a top 10 defense, though.
That's the job I would take.
Me too. I wouldn't touch the Lions. That's back to our original point. Like, it's one thing, like, I'm from Oregon. Oregon wants to take me, but I have the LSU job. It's like in college. In the pros, who gives a shit? It's like, fuck, I would be begging for the Charger job. Why? I wouldn't touch the Lion job. Move your parents out here.
I think I'd take the Jets job over the Lions job.
I think the Lions job is the most untouchable job of them all. It's by far the worst job. And I despise the Jacksonville job, but even that's clearly better with the number 1 pick.
Clearly.